Hi everyone. This week we'll be continuing talking about how you might go about measuring some of the concepts, some of the variables, some of the areas of interest that you're looking at for your project. Over the next 3 weeks, you're going to provide increasingly specific project proposal documents to me and to your lab TAs. So this week you're finishing up your topic form. At the end of this week, you should have a really good idea of exactly what you're going to do for your project. At the end of next week, you'll be submitting your formal proposal, which follows that in the example document, to your lab TAs. They'll turn around and give you some feedback. And then at the end of the following week, you'll provide that formal proposal to me for your proposal grade and for us to meet and discuss for approval. This week you're probably thinking about how you're going to get data from your participants based on the measures that you've already found through PsycInfo and PsycTest, and by looking on Google Scholar, and by working with your group to come up with empirical measures that are validated for the concepts that you're looking at. But some of you are probably realizing that you could do this project online, and Qualtrics is an online survey tool that the University of Maine provides to its students and to its faculty for use for things like this. So all you need to do is go to umaine.edu/Qualtrics, and this page here will give you lots of information about the service, about who can use it, about how to use it, etc. But ultimately what you'll do is you'll click this Qualtrics login link, and you'll provide your UMS ID and password, and you'll be logged in to Qualtrics. I'm going to point this out here now. I'll reiterate it at the end, but you can always find help on Qualtrics through Qualtrics Survey University, or by contacting Qualtrics via email or by phone. They're phenomenally helpful, but I encourage you to use their support system because it's quite good. When you get logged in, you'll see lots of different options, and at first it might be a little bit overwhelming, but ultimately what you're going to want to do is to create a survey. You're going to have several options, but first you're going to want to try the Quick Survey Builder. You're going to provide your survey a name. And you can organize your surveys into folders. Once you create the survey, you'll have a blank survey environment here to play with. You'll see that in Qualtrics, questions on the survey are broken up by blocks and then by individual items. So Qualtrics has already created an original default question block, and you could change this to whatever you want, one of your constructs, for instance. So let's say I'm measuring self-esteem. So this will be my block for self-esteem. And then I'll have individual items. I could copy those items if I had them somewhere in Qualtrics, but instead I'm going to create a new item. By default, Qualtrics will show you a multiple choice item. Now you might have all sorts of different item types for your survey. There are lots of different ways that we can ask different kinds of survey questions, and we'll talk about that in future chapters. But for most Likert-like scales, where you have an agree to a disagree range, you'll want to go into the question type here, and you can pick all sorts of different types. You can provide descriptive text for instructions or an informed consent. You can give them a graphic just to show them something. You can have a multiple choice question. You can have them enter text or put a 1 to 100 slider. You can have them rank their preference for things or list multiple things side by side. You can do all sorts of really interesting things with images that I doubt many of you will need to use, but you should take a look at these. The matrix table is a really handy question type for the purposes of these Likert-like scales. In fact, you can see one already there in the demonstration. So I'm going to select matrix table. This is going to be my instructions for my self-esteem measures. So right here I would type something like I would type my instructions. And I would have these instructions based on the survey that I had found, the empirical measure that I had found that I was going to use. In this case, we'll just pretend it's the Rosenberg self-esteem measure. After I have those instructions, I'd start to write the statements that I want participants to agree or disagree with. So for instance, these would be items from the Rosenberg self-esteem measure, or whatever measure that you're using. Now you'll notice that over here you have scales. So I'm going to start by typing strongly disagree, because that's what I want my endpoint of the scale to be. And when I do that, you'll notice that Qualtrics automatically recognizes that I have a agree-disagree scale, and it adds these automatic scale points. Well, I actually wanted a 7-point scale. So I can change that here, and now suddenly I have items for each of these. I can add as many as I'd like. I can also delete them. And at the end, I have a block with a single question that is my self-esteem measure. I can also add blocks to where I might have other measures. So maybe I'm looking at the relationship between self-esteem and athletic performance. And this is I'm going to create a new item, and maybe it's going to be another matrix. In this case, let's say that the scale I've found uses 0 to 100 sliders. So now what I'm going to do is put the instructions for my scale. So in this case, this hypothetical scale that I found has 3 items. Looking at cardio and lifting, and participants can indicate that what percentage of their time they spend on each of those activities. You'll notice that each item type has a variety of options over here. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but you might play around with them to see what you need for participants. You can also do manipulations in Qualtrics. So let's say that I was interested in the extent to which telling someone that a task will be difficult makes the task more difficult for them. So I've decided that I'm going to tell some participants that an upcoming math test is very hard, and I'm going to tell some participants that an upcoming math test is very easy, and I'm going to compare their results on that test. So what I would do is to add a block that would be for my manipulation. So in this case, this block is going to be easy instructions. And I could create a new item that represents those instructions. Next, I'd add another block that would be the difficult instructions. And I would create an item, a descriptive text item, that were the instructions for the difficult test. Finally, I'd create a third block, which is the math test. So here, for instance, I could use a series of multiple choice questions, or I could provide questions and have them do text entry for the math that I would then take a look at afterwards. And I could also measure, using a timing question, how long it took the participants to complete this part. Then, now that I have all these blocks, I need to tell Qualtrics how to present them to participants. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top and go into Survey Flow. In Survey Flow, you'll see that participants start here and work their way down. So Qualtrics defaults to having each of the blocks presented in the order that I created them. But really what I'll have is my informed consent block first, which I'll talk about next week. Then I'd have any of my surveys in whatever order I've decided to use them. But let's say I'm interested in doing this manipulation where I want some participants to get the easy instructions and some participants to get the difficult instructions. What I'll do is create a new element here. I've clicked the Add Below button, and there are lots of different types you can add. You can have surveys branch off and co-joint later. You can add all like authenticators to make sure it's a real human. But ultimately what you're going to want is a randomizer here. And what the randomizer does is randomly presents however many of the elements you have listed down here that you would like to each participant. So what I'm going to do is move these manipulation instructions into the randomizer, and I want Qualtrics to present only one of those, and I want it to evenly present it so that roughly half of my participants get this and half of my participants get that. So now participants will start off, they'll see the self-esteem questionnaire, then the athletic performance questionnaire, then they'll get one of these two instructions, and then get the math test. And in my data, it'll be clear which one of them received this and which one of them received this. I want to save my flow, and once the survey flow is saved, and I've taken a look at the look and feel and the survey options, and I've made sure that it's everything that I want, I've previewed the survey to make sure that everything flows correctly, I can launch my survey. Once the survey is activated, you'll be provided with a link that you can give to participants. But of course, don't do that until your project is approved. There are several more things I'll show you in Qualtrics. I'll show you how to view the results and how to download the data from your surveys while they're in progress, but I'll show you that as you collect data. I hope you have a great lab this week, and I'm asking you to really focus on getting those project proposals worked out. The earlier you understand exactly what you're going to measure and you have some basis for that understanding in the literature, the easier your project is going to be. Although Qualtrics is an option, online collection does have some frustrating problems sometimes, and so I encourage you to use whatever methodology, whether that be online or in person, is best for your project. And you'll think carefully about that and be able to justify your choice for how you're conducting your research. I look forward to seeing your project proposals in the coming weeks.